All right, hello everybody. I am Kara McNabb, and you're listening to the Humanity Project. I have with me today Micah McLaughlin, and we are going to talk a little bit about his experience during this coronavirus pandemic, and he is going to guide you through window into healing. So, using the triggers that are bubbling up for transformation, and then also guiding you through a home practice to help you navigate between strength and surrender. So Micah is a psychospiritual and somatic bodywork practitioner. He is the founder of Continuum Healing and the Vitalist School for Psychospiritual Transformation, and the co-founder of the Wellness Collective Grand Rapids. So hello, Micah. Thanks for being here with me.
Glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me. And yeah, I'm here in my bedroom, which I've been mostly here in my bedroom for the last month. So it's good to talk to any humans on Zoom.
Why mostly in your bedroom the past month versus
Um,
elsewhere in the house?
my partner Sarah moved in about a month ago, and her two daughters, and then of course my kids have been home. So we have a bulldog, a hairless cat, and 4 kids here. And so my bedroom has been sort of the safe place for me to hunker down and get some work done in short bursts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
What has that been like for you to try to get work done with so many people and animals around in the past 6 weeks or so?
Uh, it's been okay, and it's been there are some moments. My best bet is to wake up early in the morning and to do sort of my practices and get a cup of coffee going and just work for a couple hours, and that seems to be when I get the most done because yeah, there's a lot of like fiddle playing, mandolin playing, little girls laughing and chasing each other around that's going on. So it's okay. It's okay. There's just been a lot of changes for me and for I think most of us.
Yeah, that's been one thing for me, and really discovering how much I need and value my solitude and the peace and quiet. And I don't have that as much anymore.
Hmm.
So getting work done has been tough, like you said, in little bursts. That's what's happening for me. And I realize, ooh, I need long chunks of time to really get into things and really get things completed in the way that feels good for me. So luckily, my son has been sleeping in a lot later than usual. So I'm getting some morning time, which is great. How
Yeah.
else has, oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
How else has the coronavirus pandemic sort of stuff been affecting you personally or your business?
Um, yeah, it's been interesting. I mean, I do a lot of work with people in the physical body, and how how do we work with the body to then access what's going on like a deeper mental and emotional level. And so what I notice is that a good chunk of how I work with people is I'm really watching the cues of their body. As they're talking about something, did they lock their jaw up? As they're talking about something, did they start to hold their breath? What are those subtle movements that are happening within their body and their breath. And a lot of my sessions now have been through Zoom over the past month. And so a good part of my ability to be able to tune in and go like, what just happened right there? What's unfolding right now for you as you talk about that experience? It's just harder. And so it feels like maybe we'll say of the tools that I generally use to work with people, I may have access to 30 to 40% of them, and a lot of them I just don't. And it's still been really valuable work, really useful work, and still some really deep work. But it feels like it takes a little bit longer to get there for folks because I'm not in the room there. I'm not able to use my hands. I'm not able to help guide their breath. We tend to like go this. We tend to, as we're doing this deep work, because it's not comfortable to go back and to feel this trauma within our body or to feel the restrictions. So much of what the ego did in childhood was when we didn't feel safe, we learned to turn down sensation. We learned to disconnect from our body, disconnect from emotions. And so a lot of the work of of integrating these pieces and parts is going back and really feeling again. And when I'm, through Zoom, it's harder for me to really sort of encourage or push or challenge people to keep going. Really let yourself feel that. Really drop into that emotion, that grief, that anger, because they're like 20 miles away and safely tucked behind their computer. And so it just takes a little more creativity in terms of how we do the work. And but it's been really valuable and useful still, and especially for those clients that we've been working together for months or years. We've still been able to continue, and I think to have the connection and the work continue, especially through this time where everyone's in more chaos and life is sort of in an upheaval, it's been rich. So
Mhm. So there's a lot of questions I wanted to ask you in there, but it would probably be most beneficial for everyone listening to just talk about what it is that you do. So first off, what is the purpose of the services that you're offering? And then tell us a little bit more about what those services are or what form they
hmm.
take.
Yeah, I mean, my initial training was as a traditional naturopath, and so I was using a lot of herbs and supplements for years and helping people try to find health and wellness and reduce suffering. And it became pretty apparent, like within the first year of my practice, that while I could get people, certain steps along that process, that the core reason people were in their pain and their suffering had a lot less to do with the food that they were eating or the herbs that they were or weren't taking. It had a lot to do um, with their disconnection from their authentic self. And so when we're children, we show up in this world very much connected to our playfulness, our curiosity. If you look at a child, you can just see the innocence in them. You can see the light. I like to think about it as light in their eyes. So if you find that, a child under, say, the ages of a year or 2 years, and you catch their eyes at the grocery store, you can just see this light sort of emitting through their eyes. And so we're all born like that, and then we quickly start to realize, in order to belong in our family, in order to belong in our society, there's all sorts of ways that we have to perform. We have to be socialized, and part of that's useful, because if we go around acting like a 3-year-old all the time, that's not going to get us very far in life. But there's a large part of that where, especially if our families weren't able to handle us, if our families didn't like a certain aspect about us, and it wasn't allowed there. There's the way that as our family rejects that part of us, that we ourselves start to reject that part of us, and that stuff, the thing that we had to reject within ourselves, really goes into the shadow. And so really early on started realizing, so many of us are acting out this role that we thought we had to be to make mom and dad happy, to belong in our school growing up, to fit in with the other kids, to get included in church or wherever we were. And that causes that disconnect between our authentic self or true presence and who we really are, and then this person that we think we have to perform and be in the world. And so, to sum it up, the work that I do with people is trying to help them come back to, we'll say, that experience, that inner experience of connection to their authentic self. And and what gets in the way is a lot of belief systems that we learn in childhood, a lot of ways that we thought we ought to behave or we should behave, and a lot of a shadow work, a lot of what we've pushed away and said, I don't want to look at that, I don't want to answer that question, I don't want to deal with that fear, I don't want to look at my shame, I just want to disregard all that stuff. And so the work of helping people come back in and reintegrate those pieces and parts, and not just through the mental domain, but through the physical body, and also through the emotional, sort of restoring our connection back to our emotions again as well.
Okay. So, what are some of the ways that you facilitate that work? I know, well, what I think I know is that that has shifted quite a bit in the past like 6 months or so for you,
Mm.
and moving from working in this way that you've been working in for the past, I don't know, a few years, 10 years or so, and bringing in more breath work.
Mhm.
So I'm curious about, yeah, those ways in which you facilitate helping people to reconnect with their authentic selves and integrate the mind and the body.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of tools that I use that I've sort of gathered along the ways. And I think, you know, speaking of breath work, what breath work offers is a reactivation of our past suffering and our past trauma. And if I can connect sort of that with what's happening right now with COVID, um, and I've actually brought something here because I thought it was a useful picture. But what happens is we go through childhood, and really we spend a lot of time when something comes up. We'll say, let's just say, you needed to express your anger. You were angry the way your dad was treating you. But every time you went to express your anger, your dad got even more angry, and you were just a little child. You were just a, say, 8-year-old child, and every time you got angry, your dad got angrier, and when he got angrier, he yelled more, and he spanked or swore, did whatever he did. What we learn is that it's not good to be angry. It's not okay to be angry, and that's the belief system that goes there. But what we had going on in that moment was a high charge of anger. We had maybe our throat was like, we wanted to yell and scream at our dad. Maybe we had all this burning anger in our heart or in our belly. And what happens to that, we'll say, that raw sensory material, or what was happening in the nervous system, is that starts to shut down. Okay. And we can just go around the rest of our life and not recognizing that just below the surface there's this, we'll say, boiling anger that we never got to express. And a lot of the ways that I work with people is to help them re-experience and reactivate that thing which has been buried down in there. Okay, so in this situation, right, there's like a snow globe. This is my daughter's snow globe. I borrowed it from her room. And you're like, oh, there's nothing floating around. It's like crystal clear. There's nothing going on. But then, if there's just a little bit of agitation, you start to see all these flecks and pieces start to rise up to the surface again. And when we're using breath work and we're really breathing deeply, really charging the breath, we'll start to feel parts of the body activate. So you might feel your jaw really locked and get tight and sore. You might feel the top of your shoulders get really painful and sore. You might feel tingling and going on. And that activation is, often people will say, oh yeah, this is the spot I always have tension in my body. Or when I get stressed out, this is where I feel it. And what we're seeing is the body's actually reactivating all this held charge in the nervous system. And in some ways we can't work to integrate some of these pieces and parts of us until we actually get activated. And one of the questions I will often ask people when they sit down for their first appointment is, well, tell me about your suffering. Tell me about your pain. And because generally speaking, people don't show up at my office and just say, life is really good and I just know it could be better. I know that there's a deeper part of me. I know that there's a potential within me that is just not being tapped right now. Most of the time they show up because they're in chronic pain. Maybe that's emotional, maybe it's physical, maybe it's psychological, but there's some point of suffering in their life that's so painful that they're coming and saying, like, please help me figure out how to not be in so much pain. And so part of this process of integrating, of the transformation, is in fact to turn towards, or to let the triggers hit us and affect us, to observe them and to ask, like, what's that about? Where does that pain come from? What is this suffering actually about? And so the breath is a really great way to activate that. And there's a handful of tools I use, but another one that I'm going to share today is bioenergetics. And that's a way to move the physical body. And you could think about it, when we go through childhood, not only do we have that belief around, oh, I shouldn't express my anger because if I do, then I'm going to get punished even more. But we also have the physical restrictions that are going to happen. They might happen, at the shoulders coming up with a fear response. They might have a lockdown in the jaw. And so bioenergetics will start to work by going into a specific area and actually creating almost like you're grinding into those old patterns of restriction within the musculature, within the fascial system. And that process reactivates it. So sometimes, when you're doing the bioenergetics, it's like, oh, this feels really bad. Why would anybody want to do this? And it feels bad because you're really are breaking these old patterns that have been stuck in your body. And why you're wanting to do it is because on the other side of that is hopefully a more authentic expression of yourself, and a feeling of living within your body, in a body that feels more spacious, less restricted and confined, less rigid in the way that we have to do things, and more sort of free flowing and spontaneous and connected to the here and now.
Mhm. Okay. So I'm curious with breath work in particular. Um, I know very well the way that you work because I worked with you as a practitioner client for many years, and what you do inspired the way in which I'm working in the world. Um, so I don't have a ton of experience in breath work, but I've experienced probably somewhere between 5 and 10 sessions throughout my life. Um, Most of those have been in more of a group setting or in a space where nobody's kind of holding that space or facilitating a deeper look into what's coming up. So I'm curious about, how you speak to, things being held in the jaw or in the throat or wherever, and the breath activates that felt sense. How do you, what's my question here? I guess, what do you see the differences in navigating that with somebody when you get to work in, maybe a one-on-one session versus somebody doing breath work in a group session or in a place where there's not going to be somebody um, kind of helping them to make sense of the physical action that's happening in their body as a result?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different ways to work with the breath. And I think there are a lot of uh, practitioners out there not necessarily creating the framework and the understanding that we're using the breath to reactivate, that reactivate that sympathetic charge in the nervous system, and then to work with that material that comes up. I think that's true. So, um, when we're actually leading breathwork ceremonies, we're really trying to set it up in the first half an hour, 40 minutes, that this is an invitation to engage the armoring, to engage, like, oh my gosh, that feels really bad. And then as I engage it, there's actually a sense of like a fear that comes up. There could be a memory that comes up. It's like the cycle that wasn't completed got packed down in that part of the body. And so, on a one-on-one session, there's a lot of opportunity because I can invite somebody into exploring it through more movement. I can invite them exploring it through like engaging the breath. I can ask, what's coming up for you? And they might say like, I just feel super sad right now. And I say, okay, and if you just observe that sadness, if you just let yourself feel it again, because remember, so much of what happened was our nervous system got overwhelmed. This is too painful. This hurts too much. So we found these ways to disconnect from feeling our body, and we found these ways to disconnect from feeling the emotion. And so much of this work, whether it's breath work or whether it's actual somatic movement in the body, is we're learning to feel the body and we're learning to re-engage sensation again. And so instead of living and going through life kind of being shut down and numb to what's actually happening, we're fully present in our bodies, awake and alive and connected. And so, the breath just provides an opportunity to go, we'll say, underneath the story. We often carry around a story like, oh, I feel this way because I hurt my neck when I was 15 in this car accident. And, we can keep telling ourselves that story, but that doesn't always help to move the sensation or to change the patterning in the body. And with the breath, we can actually get up and underneath that story a lot of times. And so we're asking people to observe the sensations as they arise, engage the sensations, observe the emotions as they arise, but don't run into them as if you need to solve them or fix them. Just simply let them be and see what happens as you let yourself re-engage with sensations and emotions.
Okay. So my thoughts wandered for a minute as I was listening to you because I remembered um, last week I was at a nature trail and I met somebody who we started chit chatting about, the sort of work we do in the world and whatnot. Because I had a pocket full of ramps, wild leaves, which, piqued some curiosity. And this person ended up saying, like, I'd love to schedule a session with you sometime. And then gave him my Instagram name. And then later on, when we talked again, he was like, oh, this is so interesting. I worked with another practitioner at one point who reminds me a little bit about how you described on your Instagram what you're doing. I was like, oh, who was that? Like, knowing full well it's going to be Micah McLaughlin. And sure enough, it was you. And um, so he's like, yeah, it didn't work for him. I'm like, well, did you like actually work with him, or how many sessions did you have with him? Thinking he probably only had one. He was like, yeah, I only had one. And I'm like, what stopped you from going back? He was like, well, I just didn't understand how, um, you know, talking about something or like understanding, or like, I just don't know that there's an underlying belief system that is affecting, my chronic pain. And so as I listen to you talk, I'm like thinking about how this is such a great answer for those people who don't understand how other factors can affect what's happening in your body, and that it's really easy to use the story of, oh, well, I got into this car accident at this time, and so this is where everything stems from. So anyways, maybe I'll send this link to him.
Yeah, yeah. I think I think to be honest, really the understanding of how all this fits together in terms of how the hyperarousal of the nervous system and then the dorsal vagal shutdown occurs. It's only been the last year or two that I've really started to understand this in a deeper way. And I think I was doing a lot of this work before, but I couldn't explain it as clearly as I can now. And what I like about this explanation now is that you don't have to believe anything. You don't have to have a spiritual belief. You really just have to understand that you have a body and you have breath, and that there's been ways that you have shut down your capacity to feel. And most people, when you ask them that, they'll be honest and say, like, oh yeah, like I do that all the time. I drink alcohol and that helps me sort of anesthetize my nerves, or I'll scroll through Facebook like this for like an hour and a half, and that's a way that I can kind of escape this feeling that I don't know how to deal with. um, and so, right, for all the clients that, maybe there wasn't a good enough explanation 3 or 4 years ago, I feel much more capable of giving them an explanation of why this work's important. And to be honest with them, which is this work's hard. It's like there's a reason why people don't do this work, and that's because it's painful. It's somewhat dysregulating in the sense that we have a very structured way that we tend to want to do things. And as soon as you start to ask questions about, like, well, is this really what you want to do, or is this what your mom wanted you to do? That really messes with people's experience of who they are and how they show up in the world. And so, there's like a lot of reasons to not come and do this work. And there's a lot of reasons why people come and do a session or two, and they don't stick. And I've always been hungering and longing for what's the deepest possible transformation and healing that we can have as a human. And it just so happens that the answer to that is it's kind of intense. It's not an easy journey. So it's a worthwhile journey, but it's not easy.
Right. What do you offer to people to, help them navigate the dysregulation that can arise as people go through this work?
Yeah. So work with resourcing people. And so really resourcing is just teaching people that within their own body that they can create like a feeling of safety and connection. Uh, so it could be as simply as having them imagine a place in the world where they feel the most rooted, grounded. Maybe it's a space in nature, maybe it's in their bed at home. Um, Identifying a place in their body where when they connect with it, they feel like, okay, I'm stable, I'm okay. We could be bringing in like a memory of another person, a pet or a loved one into the session. And so, as we hit that point of activation where we're reactivating the trauma, we're reactivating that sympathetic charge, and people might have a release, right? So they might go into crying, or they might feel like a tremoring or a shaking that would start to happen in their body, which is pretty normal when we hit these points. Uh, after that cycle's completed, we're always working to get them back. Now, come back to your resource, come back to your body, come back to that feeling of safety. And so we want to be able to take people to the edge of what they can handle, have that release, and then have them safely return back to their breath and to their body. And that allows us to do it in a way that doesn't blow people out of the water, or doesn't create so much of a shift within them, or so much of a discharge that they leave just completely dysregulated, which can happen. And especially working with clients who have PTSD or a significant amount of like developmental trauma, we're much more careful with how I approach those clients, because they don't feel safe naturally in their body. And so to take them to the edge of something that's really uncomfortable, life in general might just feel uncomfortable for them. And so, we might spend a couple sessions or even longer just establishing the body as being a place of connection and safety.
Okay. So before we segue into what you will be guiding us through, I want to bring a little bit of just Micah into this rather than Micah the practitioner. So if you look around your room right now and let your eyes land on one object, what is the story behind it?
Hmm. Hmm. Okay, well, I'm gonna grab you a picture here that's hanging. I've got my altar right here, so let me just grab it. So this is a picture that hangs over my altar, and it's a picture of my brother and I. And this picture was actually taken by a friend of mine, Brian Nixon, and he was sitting across the fire, and with his phone, he shot this picture, and then yeah, he made it. He printed it and sent it to me, so it's on canvas. And we were up. It's a group of men that I've hung out with for years, and it's just a men's group. I guess we've been doing it for about 6 or 7 years, and I love this picture for so many reasons. One, well, of course, it's my brother, and I have just a deep, deep love for him, and you know, such such a connection with him, and just a spiritual level, as a spiritual journeyer with me. And you can see his dog right there, Bo. And so I love this connection of family, this connection of to an animal, right? I love the connection that we have. So there's water in the background, there's earth, really all the elements are right there. There's wood, there's fire, there's earth, there's human connection, there's animal connection. And it's just, yeah, it was just this moment, just laying by the fire, just resting and connecting. And so this is a very sacred moment. And yeah, reminds me of what life's really all about.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, thanks for asking.
So a thought that comes up as I see that is how maybe atypical that is for most men to share that level of intimacy with another man,
Mm.
right? So that's something that can be witnessed across cultures globally, um, and something that I hear from men over and over, that it's not okay to express
Mm.
feeling or emotion, or, God forbid, lay next to another man. That might make me gay, maybe.
Mhm.
So I'm curious about your response to that, and maybe some of the thoughts that you can offer to that in helping men to find some more ease or comfort in those spaces of vulnerability and intimacy.
Yeah, I mean, I think this almost segues into, what I wanted to offer today and share today in terms of moving our bodies and finding something to root us into ourselves during the midst of a whole lot of chaos happening in the world. But um, if we're thinking about masculine energy and feminine energy, right? So I'm not really talking about male and female. I'm talking about the masculine, which would be like if you were talking in like, yeah, we'd be talking about yang energy. So if we're thinking about it from um, like a Chinese mentality, the yang would be the capacity to like have direction, have a plan, move forward, take strong action in the world. And we apply a lot of those things to men, but really it's the masculine energy. And we as humans have the capacity to have the masculine and the feminine. The feminine being more sort of in that role of creativity, intuition. Um, there's a flow within the feminine, right? It's not so like this is where I'm going. It's like we're just sort of moving about and seeing what unfolds. And if we think about masculinity, we think about men in like a say first stage masculinity. This is David Data's work. But we think about first stage masculinity. You think about the 1950s man who's kind of in that like rigid, like this is who I am, this is what I'm doing, and I'm going to provide, and I'm going to make money for my family. But you also see the out of balance masculine in that, which is like I'm going to do whatever the hell I want to do, and it's a lot of spine and not a lot of tenderness, not a lot of heart connection. And that would be the masculine leaning towards that out of balance. It gets overly rigid, it gets overly driven, and then eventually there's sickness that can come from that. And if we look at the feminine side of that, we look at the second stage masculinity would be maybe you see in the 1960s men left. They left at like, oh, I just have to provide for my family and make money and work a job for 40 years to I'm going to smoke some weed and I want to go out into the woods and play drums and grow my hair out long. And so what you actually saw was men starting to integrate the feminine, right? So they're singing songs, dancing, creating art, growing their hair out long. These are all feminine things, connecting back to nature, all feminine. And so, I think what we have is men who are in that first stage who are really afraid of that second stage of being able to connect to their heart and to their sensitivity, to their tenderness, to love, really. And then you have, also men in the second stage who don't really know how to connect to their power, their authority, their strength. And David Data proposes that there's this third stage masculinity. And I would say we could just call it a third stage human. It's not really about being male or female. It's about being able to hold the strength of the masculine, which is clarity and direction and purpose and truth speaking and protection, and the health of the feminine, which is tenderness and creativity and intuition and nurturing, and that we can be beings that uh, really embody both the masculine, healthy aspects of the masculine, and the healthy aspects of the feminine. And I think there's a way for all of us, not just men, not just women, but all of us humans to be able to be in our powerful capacity to know who we are and what we're about, and also connected to our softness, our vulnerability, our tender heart as well. And that's what I'm aiming for as a human. And I just have surrounded myself with men who are okay, or we'll say we're learning to be okay, to be powerful and to be tender. Yeah.
What do you think are some of the things that contribute to um, those masculine and feminine energies that are out of balance?
Um, yeah, I mean that's probably like a big can of worms to open. But you can look at, we'll say, the institutions right now that um, are raising up men. Right? You can look at corporations. You can look at the military. You can look at sports. These are all highly masculinized places where emotions aren't necessarily encouraged. It's like, don't cry, don't show any feeling, just be a robot that's rooted in competency and performing really well, and don't worry about that sort of a vulnerable side of the heart. So we can see that. It's just that's a complex question, because you could argue that even the movement in the 1960s, where women were moving into their masculine and they were saying, like, I don't want to just stay home and take care of kids all the time. um, that stepping into that was actually moving into the unhealthy sides of the masculine, the sides that were controlling and dominating and domineering. And you can look at some of the movement into feminism as that ugly side of the masculine. Of course, the movement into women being able to speak up, to have jobs, to not just be raising children makes sense, and that's growth, and that's moving in the right direction. But the other side of that is women bringing in the same sort of violent and tyrannical um, heavy-handedness that they were fighting against. And we can still see the same of men moving now so far into the feminine, that while they may be kind and they may be good caretakers of their kids, they've really lost their backbone and their power. So there's so much going on. There's just a soup of, we'll say, confusion around masculine and feminine energy, that's happening and has happened in our culture. And you can get into really polarizing arguments about this, but it doesn't necessarily need to be. Like, my question would be like, well, can't we just be, whether we're a man or a woman or whatever we want to be referred to as, can we not just be connected to truth and power and purpose, and also be connected to creativity and intuition and love? Like, that feels like, can't we all land on that? And so there's all sorts of forces pushing against that, but to me, it doesn't seem as complicated as we make it.
Hmm. Yeah. I think about um, when I entered the corporate world and how that was like a wide-eyed shift into the toxic masculinity. Um, well, at least it became toxic for me. But with that energy of productivity and get things done, there's no room for feeling or intuition. I felt like all of that was, really, really suppressed, because it wasn't acceptable in the structure and the parameters of this world that I was working in. There wasn't room for, because I've observed this and this and this, my gut says this is the right move to make. It was, get me the data, get me the numbers, make a PowerPoint presentation for me and convince me that this is the way to go. Um, so it's an interesting example, that probably a lot of people can relate to, from those who are female bodied, um, and understanding how we carry both of those energies of the feminine and the masculine, and how that can become, the masculine can come out of balance for us as women as well. And again, like what you said with men, they can have those feminine energies pull them out of balance in an unhealthy way as well. So it's a fascinating topic indeed.
Yeah, I think David Data talks about people having more of a masculine soul or more of a feminine soul. I think he actually uses the word essence. And I like that way to think about it, because then it's not really dependent upon our gender. It's more so at the deep core of who we are, what moves us. And he would say somebody with a masculine essence would be moved by what's their purpose or mission in the world. So what am I here to do? What is it that I want to do in this world that's really important to me? Another way that you can ask a person who's more oriented towards the masculine is, when you're laying on your deathbed and you're about ready to die and you look back on your life, what is it that you would have wanted to say about yourself? What is it that you've done in this world that would feel good? That's rooting us in our mission and our purpose. And somebody with more of a feminine essence is going to ask themselves, is love flowing? Right? So is love flowing in my relationships? Is love flowing in my partnership, in my relationship to myself? Is love flowing? And those are really different points of focus. Is my mission being accomplished in the world, or is love flowing? And so they're just different. They're different attributes. And of course, a person with a masculine essence will also wonder and be curious about, is love flowing in my life? And a person has a feminine essence will want to know, am I completing my mission? But it won't be as important to them as that initial question.
Okay. How about we segue now into what you are going to lead people through? So,
Yeah.
window into healing, using the triggers that might be bubbling up right now or at any other point as a window into how you can facilitate your healing and
Yeah.
transformation.
Yeah, so kind of like I said, the explanation of how this all works through the nervous system, and really starting to understand it more deeply is just in the last couple of years. But I've been observing this for a long time, and I remember early on in my practice, I had a client come in, and he had just lost. He had a roommate that he was living with who was also sort of like a father figure to him, and the guy had like dropped dead of a heart attack the day before. And this guy came into as an appointment, and he was just really upset, and of course, and he was in tears, and he was processing what just happened and what it meant for him, and how his friend was just there, and then his friend wasn't there. And of course, there were strong emotions about losing his friend, but what it started to remind him of, and what it started to become apparent, was that when he was about, I think he was about 12 years old or so, his dad had passed away, and it was pretty sudden as well. And so this whole process of working with all the new emotions that were coming up around his friend really reactivated that window for him to start to process more of what he couldn't process at 12. And and so as he was working with what was coming up, which was a lot of grief and some anger, it was clear that this wasn't just about this process of healing and this process of working with the grief around his friend's death, but also his father's death. And so when I talk about a window of healing, that's really what I'm talking about, is when we're at home right now, and our kids are doing something, or we're feeling, say, powerless to do anything. That's going to trigger in our, back to the snow globe, that's going to trigger the stuff on the bottom, the other times in our life where we felt powerless, and we feel isolated and lonely. uh, that what's going on right now is going to remind us of the times when we were a little kid and we felt isolated and lonely. And so what I'm seeing as I'm working with a lot of folks, and observing in myself and in my own family, is I'm having a really strong reaction to this thing that's happening right now. Like, why are there so many fucking people in the kitchen right now? Like, what do I feel? I feel really claustrophobic, and I feel kind of locked in, and I feel like there's no way to get out, and I don't feel safe in my own home. And then I start to ask, okay, well, where does that go to? Because this isn't really about the kitchen being that crowded. It's about something else. And so, um, many times when we're in these situations, like with COVID, it's like, oh my gosh, there's just so much happening. We're in chaos. Nothing's the same. All of our patterns have changed. We're not in any normal habits, and everything feels kind of really overwhelming. And we just want to make it stop. We're like, I wish I just felt better. I wish this just went away. I wish, I wish, I wish, I wish. And the beauty of this time, if we can slow down, is to go like, what's happening, what's getting activated in me right now, and is this the first time that I've ever thought this, or is this a repeated pattern, or does this particular situation always activate me? And one way you can tell is because you look around and your partner and your kids are there and they're just kind of like this, and you're internally like on fire, right? Having this strong emotional response. And then you have to turn to yourself and go like, why is my response so strong right now? What about this situation is digging up old stuff from my past that is an opportunity to look at it, and then realize like, oftentimes, especially the stuff when we were in childhood, we were very powerless. Children are very, very small, and they can know what they want. They can know what's important to them, and just as easily have an adult go, "Well, sorry, you don't get that." Nah. And maybe they had an adult that cared enough to listen to them and at least said, like, "Oh, I hear what you're saying, but that's not what's going to happen." But so many of us in our childhood just got plowed over, and
Hmm.
so it's important to realize as we get activated that, am I powerless now? Well, maybe a little bit, but maybe there is power that I have. Maybe there's something I can do right now that would make this situation a bit better, instead of, say, collapsing into that like hunkered down powerless space. Does this make sense?
It absolutely makes sense to me. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It takes work. It's certainly not easy. It's like, but there is a way we can learn to catch ourselves, and it's as if we're watching ourselves. There's a the we're watching ourselves respond and react to the things that are around us, and instead of just saying, well, I'm reacting this way because my son or my daughter is being a jerk, we're like, well, I'm reacting this way because there's something deeper at play here. And that's really, I think, the invitation into that window of healing is to observe what keeps showing up again and again.
Hmm.
And if you're having trouble observing that in yourself, um, you could ask, the people who are the closest to you. Maybe you have a partner who's living next to you and say, like, can you let me know when I seem way off, or can you let me know when I'm having a strong reaction to something? And there's like an invitation then to let other people observe you too. So it's vulnerable work to invite somebody else into that space, or to really be honest enough with yourself to say, I'm going to watch myself and see how I respond. But I think there's like a lot of jewels, and I know personally for myself, there's been a ton of stuff that's happened in the last month that had it not been for COVID and like everything changing in my entire life and having our entire family cooped up into this little space, I don't think I would have reactivated some of this stuff. And
Hmm.
now I get to be like, oh wow, that's really there. That still is alive in me. It still lives in me.
Hmm. Yep. I totally get that. This
Uh,
is probably a lot of stuff for me as well. And, sometimes I can say, yes, you are being a jerk, and that's not okay. But I also know that my reaction holds something much more deep as well. So
yeah,
I need to go into what that is and figure that out and hold myself together too,
yeah,
so that I don't react as a jerk as well.
right. Yeah, in this close proximity, we are just triggering each other back and forth, and it can really create cycles, where one person gets triggered and then they trigger another person, um, where we don't ever get anywhere. You know, I
Mhm.
We can create those like habitual fights that we've had for years and decades without ever, it's like, has this ever worked when both of us are triggered and now we're in conflict? No, it never works. But yet, we seem to keep trying the same technique, the poking technique, or the fleeing and ignoring, or the shoving under the rug. We tend to run the same patterns. And so, yeah, the invitation is to say, let's try something different. Maybe there's a different way to do this.
Okay. What do you suggest to people? What are some ideas for a different way?
uh I think first recognizing, when you're into a major overreaction, where you can say, like, if you could step back and watch yourself, you could say, the reaction I'm having is way larger than what this situation warrants. That's a good clear sign you're into some sort of triggered pattern. And then the second I would say is to really to see what you can do to step back and observe yourself. Generally, with that first when we get triggered, we'll often go into that hyperarousal, which will look like that fight or flight response. So there could be defensiveness. There could be like, instead of responding to what's actually happening, we're reacting. There's a reactivity. There's that sort of energy. And often we're, again, like I said, we're not reacting or responding to what's happening in the present moment. We're reacting to the stuff that's still stuck within our body and our nervous system that happened when we were like a little kid, or happened in a past relationship. And so that first step is to just observe, like, oh, this is happening, and to name it, and then to give yourself some space from yourself, or to sort of step back from your reaction or your response and observe, like, what just happened? What just happened in this particular moment? And especially where we're all together with family and we're locked down and we're not, having a ton of movement. We're not going to the store. We're not taking a trip, in a car we're not getting a lot of alone time. I would encourage people to like step outside of the whole group, whether that means going to your room or taking a walk around the block. Really finding a space where you can just be with you and observe your reactions and your responses, and not have all this other data or input coming in. Like, that's pretty important and useful.
What about for those who aren't with anybody else? They're completely alone right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's a really great question. And because loneliness can trigger all sorts of stuff as well, so I guess that could be maybe a useful question is, where am I at right now and what do I need right now? What am I experiencing emotionally, physically, and then what do I need? Because there are times where the most useful thing we can do is to reach out to someone and go, hey, this is the cycle I'm in right now, or this is where my mind's going, or I'm feeling really hopeless, or I'm feeling, really alone, and just to invite another human being into that conversation. You know, one of the principles of polyvagal theory is that our nervous systems are co-regulating with each other all the time. And so what I have also seen, I'm a person who gets a lot of hugs. Like, I probably get, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 hugs a week. And that number has been drastically reduced. And I can feel it in my body. I can feel not gathering with community, not gathering with my people, not getting hugs from friends, and what that does. And so for sure, if you're in isolation right now, and you're feeling really lonely, or like you're needing outside connection, that's just a normal response of the human nervous system. There's nothing wrong with you. That's just completely normal. So, the cool part is we also can co-regulate our nervous systems with any mammals. So, maybe you've got a friend who's got a dog that you can borrow or something, or, you've got a cat that you can cuddle up with, and, or just, jumping on Zoom isn't quite the same, right? Because I can't feel your nervous system as much as I could if we were in the same room, but, it's a lot better than nothing.
Hmm. I would say even just connecting with the earth, if you can just like go lay out in your backyard or sit up against a tree, there's a lot of magic that happens there with helping to regulate your nervous system, because the earth has an energetic field as well. So
Absolutely.
no pets needed.
No pets needed, just a backyard. Just a small plot of grass is all you really need.
I've got my cat right here who just like never leaves my side. And I'm like, oh my God, get away. Seriously, for 1 minute. I'm actually shocked he's not sitting on me right now. He's sitting right next to me, which is rare because he just wants me as much as he can.
Mhm.
So my regulation comes from less contact lately, I've been noticing.
Less contact?
Less contact. Yeah.
Like, you're
Okay.
saying that's helpful to you, less contact?
Hmm.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes
Uh-huh.
in a given day, when particularly this animal right here like feels like it always needs something from me, um, or it's just always on me and it's interfering with my ability to get something else done, um, it drives me nuts. So
Mm-hmm.
what are you thinking there, Micah?
I'm curious if that pattern repeats itself in any other situations or relationships in
Oh,
your life.
I'm sure that it does.
You don't have
Yes,
you don't have to
that,
answer now.
I know I don't, but I won't answer in depth, but that definitely is a pattern. I've noticed that in my reaction to my animals. So that's what I love about the relationship with everything, is when you can step back and see what is happening, whether it is with a significant other, whether it's with a kid, whether it's with a stranger, or whether it's with a cat. What is my reaction here? And why is it so intense right now? And where else in my life does this present? So yeah, I can absolutely see that in context to other relationships in my life presently, or past relationships as well. So, and I can dig a little bit more deeply with that, but I'm not going to do that right here, right now.
Yeah, of course. Well, the interesting thing too about like pets or even just going out and spending time in nature is, we still can get triggered by pets or by nature, but they're a little bit of a cleaner mirror than other humans, right? Because like sometimes other humans just do shitty things and you get pissed, and you go out and like a tree smacks you in the face and you have a reaction. It's like, well, it's your reaction. You're gonna have to deal with that, and so I think my brother does a lot of work with rewilding and connecting people back to their wild self and to the earth. And he'll always say that really nature is one of the most pure mirrors because it doesn't have an agenda.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
So shall we go into some of the body movement here?
Yeah. So it's bone arch position or bone arch pose. Is that
Bow,
that's it?
bow and arrow and
Oh,
arch.
oh, okay. I
Yeah.
heard that. Bow arch.
So yeah. So one of the cool things about this pose is it's physically demanding, but it's also working on these two attributes of the masculine and the feminine. So if our masculine strength is in balance, then we're going to go into the bow pose, which is, and I'll demonstrate it here in a minute. But our arms go up and our back starts to arch, and we push out our pelvic floor, and we breathe into our belly, and our heart space opens up, and we stay in this position for a couple minutes, and there's an intensity in it, and often after you're in it for a few minutes, your mind starts to say like, this is stupid, I don't really want to do this, or I can't do this is too hard, right? So there's a part of our nervous system and our physiology that's yelling at us and saying, you're gonna die, you're not gonna make it, not gonna be able to do it. And of course nobody's ever died that I've known of from standing with their arms above their head for 4 to 6 minutes, but that's what it feels like. And so we can start to grow that muscle of the masculine energy that says, even though things are difficult, I can still do them. Even though this is painful, I can get through this. And I'm not going to collapse. I'm not just going to let my body kind of go into a ball and collapse. And that's really valuable right now because we're all doing hard things. It's like our businesses are being tested, our family structure is being tested. Another thing is just a lot of the stuff we haven't wanted to deal with within ourselves or within our family or within our business or within our communities now, even on a national and world level, is bubbling up to the surface. It's always been there. It's just been lurking in the shadows, not really being dealt with. And so, when we're doing this, we really start to feel some sensations in our body, like, oh my gosh, my neck really hurts, my arms really hurt. I just want to collapse. I want to quit. I wish I'd never started this to begin with. And the more we can build that resiliency and strength, then the more that, in the face of adversity, whether it's physical, psychological, mental, we're going to be able to go like, this is really hard, and I got this. I'm going to get through this. Like, I'm not going to collapse. And that's useful. The second is the arch pose, which it looks a lot like ragdoll for those of you who do yoga. So there's a sense of you're curling over, you're letting the shoulders really relax, so the neck and the shoulders are loose. There's a feeling like the tailbone, it has a string and it's being pulled up to the ceiling. And then there's just a slight movement on the front of your toes, so you're leaning forward on your toes, and that's just like a deep surrender, right? So um, we'll say collapsing can be what happens when the feminine goes out of balance, but surrender is the feminine imbalance. It's this sense of like, I don't have full control right now. Like, I can't control when the shutdown ends. I can't do X, Y, and Z right now. I simply have to surrender and let go. And so as we practice the strength of the bow pose and the surrender of the arch pose, we start to work on our body and also our mind around when are the times to really be in our power and to stand firmly, and when are the times to sort of soften and to surrender. And to have both of those tools and to be able to move fluidly between them um, is really good for us.
Okay. So how often would you recommend somebody practices this? Like daily or?
Yeah, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna do I think I've got it set for like a minute and a half rotation with a slight break in between.
Okay.
So the
Whew.
entire
Okay. My reaction to that is thank God.
what was that?
So I just had like a whew, my reaction was like, thank God. So a minute and a half rotation, meaning I don't have to stand like this for 6 minutes.
No, we'll start easy today. If you get deeper into it, right, of course you'll keep getting stronger, and then you can do 2 minute, 3 minute, 4 minute bow and arches. But
I was totally
yeah.
thinking in my mind, like, oh shit, what did I get myself into? I said, yeah, do the 20 minutes. Thank God.
Well, here's the other interesting thing. The whole point of bioenergetics is we're breathing, big breath through the mouth, and we're feeling the body again. So we're getting the pose, and then we're seeing, can I go a little bit deeper? And can I go a little bit deeper? And we notice, like, a minute in, we start to let ourselves off the hook. Like, we're like, oh, I'm almost done with this. I hope the timer is going to go off soon. But that's the point, to catch yourself and go, no, don't let yourself off the hook. See if you can go a little bit deeper. And yeah, that process slowly and incrementally builds strength, but it also, interestingly enough, it gets harder the more you do it because you're feeling more. So
Okay.
it's like, you might do this if you did this every day for a week, it would probably be more intense by the end of 7 days than it was at the beginning. And that's because you're feeling more deeply. You might be breathing more deeply. Hopefully you're not like letting your mind float off, right? It's a meditative practice in the sense that you're bringing yourself back over and over and over again to your body and to your breath.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Is there anybody that shouldn't do this?
Um, that's a good question. I would, just be mindful of, say, if you're pregnant, probably. You could still do it, but you might, go at like 80% and not go all the way. And I wouldn't do the really activated breath. So we'll do just a nice steady. So it's not a highly charged breath. But if you want to make this more intense, then you just breathe deeper.
Mhm.
Um, but for pregnancy, you definitely don't want to do that. So that would be the main thing. If you've got some like real major like actual pain in your shoulder, like something's really messed up, I would be cautious about that. If it's just sensation, like, oh, this really hurts, it doesn't feel good like a workout, I wouldn't be so worried about that. Some people will get a little bit dizzy, so if you start to feel dizzy at all, then just have a seat. Maybe reduce the breath so it's not quite so intense.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Sounds good.
Cool. Well, I'm going to
So
set my
I'm
dinner. Yeah.
okay. I'm just gonna put myself on mute over here so that the camera stays on you instead of coming back to me if it hears my breathing. Does that work?
Cool. Yeah, sounds good.
Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna plug. And okay, so we're actually doing a minute and 40 seconds. So you can play around between a minute and a half and 2 minutes. And we're going to do each pose 3 times. So, my suggestion is to do this upon rising in the morning. Right? So, kind of as the first thing you do is to really connect to your whole body. Also, it's great to do like if you have lunch break or in the evening. So, I would definitely start once a day, but you could do it up to multiple times a day. And the cool thing is, like I said, it's about 12 minutes long, so it doesn't eat up your entire day. So here we go. So just start planting your feet on the ground with your arms going up. 3, 2, 1, go. And then that breath is in through the mouth. The pelvic floor is pushing out, and you're breathing, if you can, down into that low belly. Really feel your whole body. You might start to feel the body heating up. And your arms are coming back. It's like you're squeezing that space between your shoulder blades. Your head looking straight ahead. So your whole body is curving back, but your head's still looking forward. You can find a spot on the wall to look at. Feeling that sensation, but not collapsing. Seeing, can you go just a half inch more? Really feeling your whole body. Three, two, one. Rest. Good. Now start curling down, and so you're going to go down, still feet shoulder width apart, all the way down. 3, 2, 1. And you're going to let the shoulders and the neck completely relax. Should be able to wiggle them around. There's no tightness in those. Your hands are hitting the ground. You can bend at your elbows, and then you're going to pull that tailbone like there's a string or a rope pulling you up to the ceiling. And then lean forward on your toes and just practicing, like really surrendering deeper and deeper to gravity. That breath should still be deep and in your belly. You can even relax the jaw, just let the jaw hang. Three, two, one. Rest. Slowly start to come back up again. And your head's going to be the very last thing to come up. 3, 2, 1. Back into that bow pose. Pelvic floor is coming out. Head straight ahead. Arms are back. And real full breath in through the mouth, down into the belly, down into the pelvic floor. Feeling everything. You're really noticing where is the tension in your body, where's the holding occurring, and just feel it, go into it, really engage it, keep breathing. Noticing if your mind starts to space out, you start to think about something else, just come back. Come back again and again to your body, to your breath, to feeling. Keep going, you're almost there. A little further, a little deeper. 3, 2, 1. Rest. Good, now coming back again to that arch pose. 3, 2, 1. Checking that the neck and the shoulders are relaxed, tailbone pulls up, and then a slight bend up to your toes. There should be a slight bend in your knees. Don't totally lock your knees, give them a little bit of bend. And then see if you can go just a touch deeper. Keep the breath going right at your belly. Three, two, one. Rest. Coming back up for the last bow pose. All the way up, this time deeper than the other two. Really feeling the activation in the body. And if you want a little bit more intensity, then you can increase the breath into the mouth, out through the mouth, down into your belly. If you want even more intensity, then with each exhale, go a little bit deeper. Sometimes tremoring will start to occur. If your body starts to shake and tremor, just let it. It's just a natural response of your nervous system discharging old stuck trauma, old stuck energy. The muscle's just getting tired. It's just totally normal. It's good for you. So feel that it's intense, but it's intense and it's good. It's good for you. Keep going. A little deeper. Feeling that strength to keep going even when something's difficult. Don't quit. Don't collapse on yourself. You're not going to die. Feel that strength. 3, 2, 1. Rest. Good. Last one. You're going to go fully into that surrender one last time. Bend in the knees. 3, 2, 1. Bend in the knees. The tailbone pulls up. Head and the neck are loose. And you lean forward onto your toes. And let the breath come in through the mouth and just fill your belly. Really feel your whole body. Keep going. See if you can go a little bit deeper with the breath and with just surrendering. Really surrendering, really letting go. Three, two, one. Rest. Good. Come on up and we'll be done for now. And give yourself a little shake. Shake your body. And just take a second. Just take 30 seconds, 60 seconds, and feel that breath move through your whole body, through your whole core. Feel your feet rooted on the ground. Maybe some tingling or some numbness. That's all normal. It's completely safe and okay. When you're ready, just come on back and we'll chat some more.
Okay, I'm back.
Okay.
It was different than I anticipated it to be.
How so?
For one, it was a lot easier,
Mm-hmm.
but is interesting as I notice my, well, what I have been noticing with myself lately is how my mind can go into this place of kind of like the reaction I had before you started leading us through it of like, oh no, oh my God, that's going to be too much. And then I go into it and I'm totally fine. So it's interesting to observe that coming up with this, physical exercise, this breath exercise that you led us through. And then it was totally fine. I noticed with the first set, going into the surrender fold, how good that felt. And then with each set, it got more difficult. It was harder to hold myself in that surrender, which I was really surprised by. And at the end, the thought came into my head, like, when is this going to be over? And then I heard the 3, 2, and I was like, oh, I've never been so happy to hear that 3.
Yeah, there is a sense after the more you do this that you drop in deeper and then it activates those places you didn't even know, like the muscles that you weren't even aware that were there. Right? They start to get activated and you start to feel stuff that you just weren't aware of, and so there is a sense of deepening and almost more difficulty as you go. And the goal would be to find your edge where it feels like, oh, this is about as deeply as I can push, and stick with it and just keep consistently doing it and then grow and build over time. So you can go deeper and deeper, which, of course, builds more resiliency. And what I love about the bow and arch is first of all, it only takes, 12 minutes. And secondly, it's like how much in life, how useful is in life to be able to go from strength and power and stability to softness and tenderness and surrender, because this human experience is really calling on us all the time. Sometimes we have to show up and really fight and declare and be in our powerful strength. And sometimes we need to be in a really gentle, tender space. And I find that the more easily I can move between those spaces, um, the more I can stay in flow with life and I can navigate my life in a way that feels like spacious and easeful instead of clunking around and making mistakes and missing cues all the time. So it's physical, but it's also the psychological growth of being in our power and being in our surrender.
Yeah, it was a good reminder for myself from that more psychological aspect of like, yeah, Kara, this thing in life right now is really hard. Some stuff I've been going through for the past 8 months or so. And this is a physical practice that is a reminder of like, yeah, it feels like it's going to be really hard, but you keep moving through it and everything keeps being okay. And you're going to continue to move through it and you're going to continue to be okay,
Mm,
whatever it is that you encounter. So that's exactly where my mind went as I was doing this. So
mhm,
lovely. I can't wait to keep practicing this and seeing what else emerges.
mhm.
So, the timer that you were using, is that like a specific one that people could download to get that 3, 2, 1, or just to program
Yeah,
the?
let me grab it here. Um, I've been playing around with this one, and there's different ways you can set it up with dings or voices, but it's called Gym, like GYM, Gym Next Flex Timer.
Okay.
And yeah, you can just set up. It's just a free app, and you can set up with intervals. And so that was 1 minute and 40. But you could start to play around with 2 minute intervals or 3 minute intervals if you wanted to, and you can set the rest in between different lengths as well. Yeah.
Okay. I think Insight Timer also offers that
Mhm.
capability to add intervals, I think. So
Yeah, probably.
those
And if you're looking for more bioenergetics, my teacher, Dev Raj, he's got a YouTube channel, and we can link that in wherever you put it down. And he's got a ton of different bioenergetics. So this is the bow and arch is sort of the foundation to bioenergetics. But there's a lot of other ones, so people who deal with a lot of jaw muscular face tension, he's got one specific to that. He's got a really nice grounding one that's out right now. It's a great one if you're pretty new to bioenergetics. It's not over the top in terms of intensity, but it's really useful. And with a lot of this stuff, it's like you have to remember these chronic armoring patterns have existed in our bodies for decades. And so it takes time. And so just like that consistent practice of chipping away at it is really, really useful. And so the bow and arch every day is a nice introductory. But if you wanted to look up some other workout videos where you can engage with, that's a great resource as well.
okay. All right. I will definitely link
Cool.
that. Okay. Is there anything else that you'd like to share or end with?
Oh, this was fun. Thanks for the invite. And I hope that these little tools people can just incorporate them, because what tends to happen is we have a self-care routine. We do yoga, we're into meditation, and then something like COVID happens, or some struggle we go through happens, and our tendency as humans is to abandon all self-care. It's like, oh my gosh, I just have to solve this problem, and the reality is this problem that we're in right now isn't going away like right away. So we need to learn how to carry on and get back to our self-care practices. And in some ways, what we really need to do is double down on the things that we know make us feel better, that we know it regulates our nervous system. So yeah, that would just be my encouragement, is like whatever that when you do it consistently makes you feel better. 5 minutes of meditation, yoga, a walk in the woods, just the gift and the compassion and the care to really give yourself that you deserve, that you need, that the world needs you to be your best version of you right now. Your family needs you to be the best version of you right now. You need to be the best version of you, and that just requires pouring into ourselves with time and energy and practices.
Thank you, Micah. Thank you for doing this with me. And if you listening would like to contribute to this Humanity Project Fund, 50% of it will go to Micah and 50% of it will go to me. So you can find the links in the notes below and just indicate which episode you're donating to so that I can get it to the right person. All right. Thank you very much. And I will see you later.